We have a few minutes left for questions and answers. I believe there are already some online. Perhaps Katarina would be so kind as to read them out and perhaps identify which speaker they are addressed to.
Thank you very much to our speakers. It was a very, very interesting panel. Our Q&A section has been open for questions. We also have some people who have questions here, so I would first give the floor to Antonio to place his question. I don't know who you want to place your question to. Yeah, you can use the micro. I think it's probably best.
Okay, this is working. Thanks. So, Filippo, I have just a very small question. It's more of a question that I would have done if you had come in person. I would ask you over a coffee, but now I can make this question here in this context. So, I fully agree with you when you say that even though MiCA is it's truly a fantastic project, it has, of course, its drawbacks, and one of them would be to divide crypto asset regulation into two completely different sets of legislation, even though they have a lot of similarities, of course. So MiCA and then the trio of the prospectus regulation, MiFID, and the market abuse regulation. So my question for you is, taking into account that forces people to do some kind of a rigid taxonomy in concerning assets that are by nature very hybrid, because it's very difficult to talk about truly solely utility tokens. Of course, there's always a component of investment, and most people have crypto assets also with some investment intention. So my question is, what would you think a better alternative would be? Do you think that a unified approach to regulation would have been better? So basically, either to put all crypto assets under the same regulation, or just consider that all crypto assets, because they have, or almost all crypto assets, because they have some kind of investment component, should all be treated, of course, with some specificities as securities or financial instruments? Thank you.
I'm really glad that this question comes up in Lisbon, because in 2018, it looks like prehistory by now, I had the honor of being invited by your supervisory commission to give a presentation on exactly this problem, taxonomy, crypto assets, and it was really the beginning of everything. The only thing that we just had on our tables was the FINMA's position paper on the classical tripartition, utility, payment, and financial tokens. And I'm really glad that this question comes up again in Lisbon, because it is really the question. Even though I am a huge fan of MiCA, I think that taxonomy is a big issue of this regulation. And it's also a little bit contradictory. The way in which MiCA regulates non-financial tokens, utility tokens, is pretty close to financial regulation. And this is a little bit contradictory, because we are applying a methodology which is proper for credit institutions, investment service providers, or issuing prospectus for transferable securities to assets which are not financial. It's MiCA that tells us that those assets are not financial, utility tokens, they are not financial, but we apply the same methodology. And then we have this problem of taxonomy. So I think that if I were to choose the proper solution, I would really bring at this point these assets into the scope of existing capital markets EU regulations, applying very strongly principles of proportionality, exemptions, so as not to kill the market before it actually develops. But it seems to me that there's a little bit of hypocrisy in saying first that these are non-financial assets, but then you don't really explain why and what is their relationship vis-a-vis financial assets, properly speaking. But then at the same time, you do treat them, in fact, as they are, as if they were financial in nature. You submit them to the licensing principles. The requirements for service providers of these assets are pretty close, if not identical, to the ones that you apply to investment firms and so on.
Thank you, Professor Nunziata. It was very clarifying. I believe I don't think we have any more questions here in the audience, but we have some questions that were placed online. Our session was streamed for 100 participants. I believe one of the questions was already exhausted in your answer right now. Can you further elaborate on why do you think MiCA's taxonomy isn't good? And the second question, which I believe you have answered here in the chat, but I would like you to share that with us, how classifying cryptos using artificial intelligence. So, thank you very much.
I think that the question here specifically refers to algo asset reference tokens, and these have been discussed quite extensively over the past weeks. And it is still unclear because the definition of ARTs in the draft of MiCA is a little bit outdated because it's a definition that was set on the table after the Libra project, then turned into the Diem project and then completely abandoned, create all that fuss and discussion that we all remember back in 2018 and 19. And the definition of ARTs seems to be in the direction of essentially capturing stable coins that are similar or close to the original Libra project. But algo ARTs are a different kind of story. And we've just seen, even recently, how dramatic their impact may be on the stability of the market. And I'm not sure what will happen here, whether a political agreement will be reached so that also algo-driven ARTs will be included into the MiCA proposal or not. Let's wait and see what happens, even today, maybe.
Thank you, Professor Annunziata. This is definitely a topic in high demand, and we are all looking forward to see what comes out of the political agreement.
If there are no more questions from our audience, I would just like to thank once again to all our speakers for their excellent presentations and ask the audience for an applause to all of them.